Throughout my life, I've been captivated by many games. Games like Abzu for its beautiful art direction, or games like Ultrakill for its inventive and insane gameplay. Games like Inscription for its really cool meta storytelling. Yet none of these games truly captivated me the way this game has. And it's a game that almost nobody knows. Yeah, I bet that wasn't what you had in mind. My Nights at My Singing Monsters is a horror game released on October 15th and subsequently deleted a few days later. I first discovered the game through content creator WinterMG, who made several TikToks about his playthrough of the game.
Nights at My Singing Monsters? Is this licensed? Is this a real My Singing Monsters spin-off? No reviews? Am I about to be the first person to play this game?
The game appears to be a strange mix of Five Nights at Freddy's and My Singing Monsters. The Steam description clearly shows that this game has nothing to do with Big Blue Bubble, the creator of the original My Singing Monsters. While initially just laughing at it and forgetting about it, the more I saw about the game, the more it piqued my interest. This game had a grip on me, not because of its gameplay, art direction, or anything else, but because of the amount of questions it made me ask. Why was this game made? And by who? What is the story behind My Nights at My Singing Monsters? This game is a mystery, and I want to be the one to solve it. The game is essentially a carbon copy of the Five Nights at Freddy's gameplay loop, meaning it'd be appropriate to call it a FNAF fangame. You have to survive 5 nights while you are in an office, in which you can barely move. The enemies, in this case monsters from My Singing Monsters, will gradually come closer until they get in the office, in which they require a unique method to deal with them. Survive for a set amount of time, and you move on to the next night until you beat all 5 nights, after which the game ends. Upon opening the game, you are greeted with a menu screen with a creepy, slowed-down version of the Plant Island song from the original My Singing Monsters. If anything about the game is not to your liking, you can enter the settings menu. However, upon opening it, the creator simply insults you for even trying to mess with perfection. This shows that the creator wants you to play the game as he intended, and no other way. In case you want to replay any of the nights, you can access all 5 of them in the Select Night menu. It's curious though that you can access every night without having played them first. All 5 are unlocked right from the start. But without further ado, it's time to finally press play and load into our first night. Never mind! Upon pressing play, you are greeted with a character creation screen. On the left and right sides of the screen are more personal questions, with some of the more interesting ones being whether you have a strong relationship with your father, your body fat percentage, your house address, body count, and your favorite mineral. In the middle of the screen is a generic class selection system that you would find in fantasy games. Among these options, there are once again a couple interesting ones, like Incinerator or Fish Stick. However, nothing in this menu actually affects the gameplay, so we can just start the first night. The game starts with a newspaper clipping in typical Five Nights at Freddy's fashion. The newspaper describes a story about mysterious billboard sightings, billboards that advertise a job feeding monsters at a plant island. The strange part is that these billboards disappear and reappear in different places. We play as Cade Kingston, the author of this article, and a journalist desperate to find out what on earth is going on. It is at this point that Night 1 starts. This brings us to one of the first major lore-related questions. What is up with these billboards? We find ourselves in what looks like an office. On the left of the desk is a sweet gaming rig connected to a monitor, giving us 2 basic controls. Interact with E and access the cameras with Q. Behind the player there is a ginormous blaster, also known as the potato cannon. There are 3 large buttons, one on the left, one on the right, and one in the center. Lastly, there is a slots machine. While Cade accustoms himself to his new workplace, a phone starts ringing, introducing us to the only other character that we encounter in the game. The man who we only know as the phone guy, thanks to a prompt at the start of the night that allows us to mute him. Phone guy gives Cade a warm welcome to his new job.
Hello, and welcome to your first night here at the Plant Island. I'm afraid that I do not have enough time to explain everything. You may or may not be in grave danger.
He gives Cade a basic rundown of what he has to do to survive the night. When he is done with his explanation, there are 2 matters he wants to make very, very clear.
Just remember, these are not your singing monsters. They are my singing monsters. Don't ask what's in the boxes. It is none of your concern what's in the boxes. Just know that it is very, very important.
This adds another question to a list of many to follow. What actually is in the boxes? After this, phone guy hangs up the phone, leaving Cade all by himself. Throughout the night, the player will be pursued by 5 different monsters. These are all the single element monsters from the original My Singing Monsters: the Noggin, the Mammoth, the Toe Jammer, and the Potbelly. All of them will have different ways of attacking the player. The Noggin and the Mammoth will both appear in the office through the main hall in the middle. Noggin will stand more on the right, whereas Mammoth will stand in the shadows of the hallway, making him hard to see despite his white fur. Once a monster enters the office, the player needs to blast them with the potato cannon, which will feed them and make them disappear again. Toe Jammer and Potbelly will appear on the left and right vents respectively. Upon hearing the sound cue, you can shine the light to reveal them and then blast them with the potato to make them leave again. Keep in mind that the potato cannon only has limited ammo, which means pinpoint accuracy in case of a monster attack is required. It's worth noting the change of appearance of certain monsters compared to their original counterparts. While Noggin and Toe Jammer stayed largely the same, Mammoth and Potbelly got some razor-sharp chompers, and Potbelly even got some sweet chokers. However, that's only 4 out of the 5 monsters this night. There's still one left, referred to only as the Big One. This creature represents the only 4-element monster from the original Plant Island, the Entbrat. Entbrat works differently from the other monsters, since the potato cannon cannot stop him. He starts out in the bakery, eating the potatoes there. When the bakery is out of potatoes, he'll try to run into your office. Once you hear him move around, you have to close the big door in the center, stopping him from getting in. The door showcases one of the best modern game design decisions of all time. See, the door has a hole in the middle, small enough to keep the Entbrat out, but big enough to let the other monsters in still. So even if you close the door, you are never truly safe, adding more to the terror of having a monster appear in your office. Throughout the night, you can keep track of the monsters with your cameras. All monsters except the Entbrat will start in the meadow and slowly make their way into your office. Using the cameras, you can see how close a monster is to the office, and also see how close the Entbrat is to attacking. The closer the Entbrat is to the camera, the sooner he will appear in your office. Closing the door and shining your lights cost power, which you have a limited supply of. Upon running out of power, you will be completely unable to close the door, nor will you be able to shine your lights. Lastly, there is the gambling mechanic using the slots machine in the office. The player can interact with the slot machine to get a variety of different outcomes. Upon spinning 3 potatoes, you will obtain unlimited ammo in the potato cannon. Upon spinning 3 power symbols, your power completely refills. However, those are the only 2 positive outcomes. Upon spinning 3 skulls, the ghost will appear, killing you instantly. You can also spin 3 explosions, causing an unnamed country to nuke your office. The gambling can save you in a pickle, but is definitely not required to beat any night. Once you survive 6 in-game hours, the night finally ends. And now it's time for night 2. As Cade settles back in his office, he once again gets a call from the phone guy. He congratulates Cade for surviving the first night and PayPals him the money, exactly $130. It is at this point that the phone guy says a rather interesting line.
You know what they say? It's not about the message, it's about sending the money.
This line gives us a better idea of what kind of man the phone guy really is. After the formalities, something rather strange happens. Phone guy plays a recording of what happened to the person working here before Cade.
Do you know what the Trumpler did to someone last week? I got it all on camera. I liked that one. He was so good at Fortnite, but not so good at feeding monsters.
What's strange is that the phone guy doesn't sound regretful or sad about the death of a former employee. He actually seems more excited to show Cade, and seems to be taking some kind of twisted pleasure from it. After the recording, phone guy tells Cade he'll be okay, and hangs up again. The player is once again faced with 5 different monsters. However, this game it's a handful of 2-element monsters, and the Entbrat once again. The new monsters are the Maw, Octopus, Drumpler, and Furcorn. The first 3 will appear in the room through the center hall, connecting to the mines. Octopus will be on the left, taking the place of Noggin. Maw will be in the hall where Mammoth used to be, and Drumpler will appear on the right. Furcorn will be the only monster appearing in vents, appearing in both the vents. Once again, all monsters can be warded off with the potato cannon except for the Entbrat, who was notably more aggressive this night. While he would only appear once on night 1, he appears twice or even more if you're super unlucky on night 2, meaning you have to watch your power even more than usual. This night is surprisingly easier than night 1, as all monsters are incredibly obvious when they enter the office, more so than on night 1. Once you complete another 6 hours, the night is finished, and it's time for night 3. Cade once again returns to his now trusty office, and as per usual he gets called by the phone guy. After introducing the new monster appearing from this night onwards, phone guy goes back to acting strange. Instead of making friendly conversation with Cade, he simply asks a bunch of questions that I'm sure Cade himself was asking, making phone guy get a step closer to revealing his true intentions.
You ever wonder why it takes energy to keep the door closed? You ever wonder why there's a hole in the middle of the door? You ever wonder where all of the other monsters go after each night? You ever wonder who I am?
Once again, let's add these to the list of questions we have. The player is once again greeted with a new selection of monsters. This time it's the 3-element monsters, Bogart, Clamble, and Pummel. Unlike the Night 1 and 2 monsters, these 3 actually have their own mechanics. Upon hearing Bogart's violin, he will appear in your office. However, unlike the monsters before him, he will actually start approaching the player. Swift action and a shot from the potato cannon will make him leave again. Once you hear a loud bass drum, Pummel has appeared in the office. However, unlike any monster before him, Pummel actually appears behind the player, either on the left or right side depending where the sound came from. Once he appears, you can use the potato cannon to get rid of him. Clamble is the vent monster of this night. Once you hear a cymbal, Clamble has arrived in either one of the vents. However, unlike the other vent monsters, Clamble can also appear in the middle hall. There are no lights there, and the only way to see him is his bright purple eyes. These eyes make him very obvious, meaning you don't actually have to shine your light in the vents, however. This is very important as power is a scarcity this night. The Endbrat makes his 3rd and final appearance this night and is the most aggressive he has ever been. He will definitely appear 3 times, and maybe more if you're super unlucky. This makes power management a very big priority this night, and might even tempt the player to hit the gambling machine, in case they are close to running out of power. The final monster this night is the Punkleton. He stays away from you as long as you wind him up, a clear nod to the music box from Five Nights at Freddy's 2. If you don't wind him up for a prolonged amount of time, he will jump scare you, ending the night. As per usual, if you survive the night, you move on to night 4. However, it was this night that I encountered something strange. While I was just tending to my normal office tasks, I got a pop-up on my screen saying it's not me, with a picture of the Ghast from the original My Singing Monsters playing its signature tune. While initially just seeming like an obvious reference to Golden Freddy from Five Nights at Freddy's, it's still worth exploring who or what this creature could potentially be. Therefore it's worth adding it to our list of questions. This night is probably the 2nd hardest night, simply because of the Entbrat and its frequent visits to the office. It is now time for the penultimate night. Night 4 starts much like every other night does. Cade gets in the office and Phone Guy calls him. However, the mood is vastly different this night, as Phone Guy finally reveals his nefarious plan.
My daughter was a very brave little girl. She loved the monsters that I created, so I kept making them. One day, however, she got too close to one. It ate her. I heard the scream coming from outside. My little girl was taken from me that day. I found a mysterious book on the planet Island. It discusses the magical capabilities of this place. On page 808, it describes a method to revive from the dead. To bring my little girl back, it requires, however, sacrifices. You. And 99 other beautiful people. Once the souls are given unwillfully, I will get my daughter back. Don't you see? You were never here to feed monsters. The monsters are supposed to kill you.
I will be discussing this later on in the lore section of the video, but for now let's just go through this night's mechanics. The office has changed slightly, as the big door in the middle is now gone, most likely since Phone Guy is growing more desperate to get Cade killed. The big button now only shines a light down the middle hall, revealing any monsters that might be lurking. It is also worth noting that there is now a strange face in one of the bakeries. It's unknown who this is and why he's here, but it does not affect the gameplay of the night. Once again, he will be added to the list of questions. There are now only 4 monsters including Punkleton, these being the weirdos of the plant island, Talker and Parlsona, along with Gajoob and of course, Punkleton. The weirdos function the same as the basic monsters before it. Parlsona will appear in the vents, while Talker appears in the middle. Even if you don't shine your light down the middle or the vents, you'll be able to tell they're there from their sound cues and glowing eyes. Design-wise, the weirdos only vaguely resemble their original designs. Talker retains a similar body shape, while his eyes are replaced with huge black voids, only showing a small white pupil. Instead of the 2 goat horns he has in the original My Singing Monsters, he has a bunch of spikes on his head. Parlsona is even more different, looking more like a reskin of this Talker, rather than her original design. Next up is the Gajoob, a monster that doesn't eat, but hunts. The only way to avoid death by Gajoob is to press the right mouse button to wear the Gajoob mask. When he stands in front of the desk playing his lovely melody, he must put on the mask as quick as possible. After a short while, the Gajoob will go right back to where he came from. As for Punkleton, he still functions the same way as he did before. Night 4 is by far the easiest night. Not only are there fewer monsters, the mechanics of 2 of them are the same as the players used to. The sound cues for the weirdos are also very long and very obvious, making them almost impossible to miss. Gajoob is also very hard to miss, and has a lot of leeway even if you're late with putting on the mask. Having said all that, it is now finally time for the last night. Night 5. The final night starts just like all the other nights before it, with Cade getting into his office. However, unlike before, the phone doesn't ring. This could simply mean that the creator didn't think about adding it, but it could also mean that the phone guy is now a lot closer than we might like. He doesn't really have anything new to add. He instead spends most of the night breaking down, blaming Cade for the death of his daughter, like in this highly emotional line.
Why'd you take her away from me? Why'd you take her away from me?
Sadly, no new lore is really being explained here, so let's just instead talk about the gameplay. Night 5 is by far the hardest night in the game. The monsters that are present this night are absolutely roided up, and throughout the 6 in-game hours you will rarely have a moment of peace. What makes this night so difficult, however, is that certain monsters showing up at the same time, or in very quick succession, will almost always result in death. Aside from Punkleton, there's an entirely new roster of characters once again, starting with the Rare Fwog, the only rare monster in the game. Rare Fwog is the vent monster of this night, and can appear in both the left and the right vents. However, the monster glows, meaning you don't necessarily have to shine your light. However, what sets Fwog apart from the other vent monsters is the fact that he does not have a sound cue. This means that you will have to constantly check the vents to see if he's there. A strategy to deal with him can be to check the breathing structure on the cameras, as he will stay there for a while before he attacks. When you notice him there, you can check the vents more frequently. Next up is the T-Rox, who might be the most dangerous monster this night. The T-Rox will appear in the middle hall, much like Talker from the previous night. However, T-Rox does not have a sound cue or any kind of glowing parts on his body. This means you have to frantically check the middle light to see if he's there in order to survive. Just like most other monsters, blast him with a potato to get rid of him. The reason T-Rox is so dangerous is because he is incredibly easy to miss. If you don't check the middle light for too long, you're almost guaranteed to perish. Next up is the Sugarbush, or as he's called in the files, the Omega Farter, and trust me, he will do exactly that. Sugarbush is the only monster in the game that doesn't actually appear in the office. Instead, he will fart down the vents, essentially gassing the player. When he does fart, the entire screen will go green, accompanied by a very long fart noise. When he does, all you have to do is put on the gas mask and you will survive his attack. While on his own, the Sugarbush is probably the easiest monster to deal with. It's because of the onslaught of other monsters that Sugarbush becomes dangerous, as wearing the mask slows the player down tremendously and also hinders their vision. The final monster this night is the Woobox. Much like monsters before it, it will appear in the middle hallway. Its electric parts glow, so it's very easy to tell when Woobox arrives. When he does arrive, you have to press the new gigantic EMP button in the corner of the office. Doing so will disable the Woobox for a while, alongside every electronic in the office, essentially completely disabling the player for several seconds. This makes Woobox another dangerous adversary, and probably the reason this night is so difficult. If Woobox and either Fwog or T-Rox appear together, it will almost always result in a death, seeing as you will not be able to see them until it is most likely too late. And since the monsters are very aggressive this night, the odds of this happening are rather high. However, after surviving the onslaught that is night 5, you are finally done. Phone Guy tells you this is not over, and the credits finally roll, accompanied by an AI-generated song and Shukabush's ass. Well, now that all the nights are done, let's go over what we currently know about the plot of My Nights at My Singing Monsters. Phone Guy, the main antagonist, has a daughter. As a way to entertain said daughter, he managed to create monsters, which she loved. It's uncertain how he managed to create monsters, but it most likely has something to do with the magical properties of the plant island. However, on one faithful night, his daughter was eaten by a monster after getting too close, sending Phone Guy spiraling. One day he finds a book on the plant island that contains a spell of some sorts that can resurrect the dead on page 808. I looked up what the number 808 means, and according to Google, it's an angel number that promises the universe will align to support your financial and material well-being, a sign that your work and dedication are going to bear fruit. This could signify that this was the right path for Phone Guy, that his life brought him to this page, and that the spell is his reward. The spell requires the death of 100 beautiful people and their unwilling souls in order to resurrect a dead person. Phone Guy does not hesitate and starts a murder spree. He entices anyone unfortunate enough to encounter one of his strange billboards, with a job feeding monsters on the plant island. However, Phone Guy sabotages all of his employees so that they are sure to be killed by his creations. Meanwhile, Cade Kingston, the protagonist, thinks there is a connection between the strange billboards and the disappearances, and decides to do some investigating himself, leading to the events of the game. Sounds like a pretty good summary, right? Well, there's actually a lot more lore than what we just hear in the nights. Upon dying on any of the nights, there's a small chance you encounter a minigame involving the Dipsters. While there isn't much to say about the minigame itself, on night 1, 2, and 3, a dialogue plays during the minigame. Upon dying on the first night, we hear what sounds like a news report or a talk show, with Cade being a guest.
San Clario continues to plunge into chaos and frenzy as more and more people go missing. The missing total is up to 114 people as of earlier today. Lots of people are looking into what could possibly be happening to them. Some investigators have found a connection between these strange billboards being found on the side of the highway, advertising a strange job feeding monsters, and the missing people. We have a journalist on the line, Cade Kingston. He's been studying this from the beginning. Let's pass it over to him.
This interview gives us a few tidbits of lore, like where the story takes place, a place called San Glorio, but that could be inaccurate as the audio is a little bit unclear. We also know that the number of disappearances before Cade is 114. We also get to hear what Cade himself sounds like, and I have to be honest, he kind of sounds like Leafy is here.
Yeah, thanks, Liam. So yeah, this is absolutely insane what's happening right now.
Aside from this, we don't really learn anything new. However, the secret dialogue on night 2 is a completely different story, and I will let you listen to it in its entirety.
I know you didn't want a child, but I'm pregnant.
What did you just say, you rotten little whore? Why are you pregnant? We were not supposed to have children. You will pay for this. What have I done?
We hear an honestly eerie dialogue between two individuals. A woman tells a man she is pregnant, after which the man presumably kills her. But who are these two individuals? The man sounds like Phone Guy, but also not really. While very similar, the voice sounds a bit higher. While the two are most likely voiced by the same person, he seems to put on a different voice for this dialogue compared to the rest of the nights. Now, is this Phone Guy or somebody else? Personally, I believe that this individual is no one but Cade Kingston himself. What evidence do I have? Well, just like everything else in life, it all comes back to gambling. Upon spinning 3 skulls and getting killed by the ghost, it shows a unique death screen, one with a whole bunch of text. There's a lot of lore we can make out here. First of all, ghosts are beings that serve a greater being who seeks individuals who have sinned in their past life. The people of San Clario call this greater being the Prophet of the Red Circle. This being, and any of the ghosts that serve it, are said to be former citizens from San Clario. But how does this connect to Cade? Well, in the following paragraph it says that this ghost in particular seems to have it out for Cade, and that Cade was most likely an enemy of this ghost. At the end of the ghost death screen it tells us to not pay too much attention to the reflection of the ghost, but we'll come back to that later. If the individuals in the monologue are in fact Cade and his wife, it would explain why the ghost, who would be Cade's wife, has it out for him. Now we do know what Cade sounds like, thanks to the first monologue, and it doesn't really sound that much like what we hear here. However, the Cade we hear in the first monologue has a weird filter on his voice, and I think my explanation both explains the monologue and the ghost who has it out for Cade. The third secret monologue is probably the weirdest. We hear what seems like a teaser of a new character in the lore. Have a listen.
But arrogant little worm, the man in the right corner, he is simply a puppet. He thinks he is calling the shots, but he is doing my bidding. I have many people doing my bidding. Pretty soon, the people of San Clario will bow down to me. These fools don't even know what will hit them.
The man in the right corner this new guy refers to is Phone Guy. We can once again refer to the ghost death screen, as it says the man in the right corner is collecting souls for his concoction to save his daughter. The phone is also in the right corner of the office, so it checks out. However, the death screen also tells us that the recipe he found is actually a fake one, and the souls he collects are actually going to the same being that the ghosts serve, also known as the Prophet of the Red Circle. This explains why there are more than 100 disappearances, as no amount of unwillfully extracted souls will make the recipe work. I think that makes it pretty obvious that the current speaker of this monologue is, in fact, the Prophet of the Red Circle. Now his plans are currently unclear, but if I had to guess, he's turning a bunch of people into ghosts, creating an army. His end goal does still remain a mystery. Maybe it's world domination, maybe it's something else entirely. At this point in time, there's simply no way to know. Now that all the lore in the game is covered, it's time to return to the list of questions we made throughout the gameplay. Now a lot of these have become quite obvious. The billboards advertise a job feeding monsters and disappear, most likely so Phone Guy doesn't get caught, and the door has a hole so you get killed easier. Next up is the question of what's in the boxes. I think there are 2 main options here. Either it's Phone Guy's daughter, or the souls Phone Guy has collected. Maybe even both. This could make sense, seeing as the revival spell is based around the magic of the plant island, meaning the souls in the body should both be present. What happens to the monsters after each night is honestly an interesting one, as there really is no hints in the game as to what happens to them, so it is purely speculation. I think it's honestly most likely that they are simply killed to make place for the new ones. These monsters seem specifically designed to kill any monster feeders that work for Phone Guy, so if they fail that mission, there really is no more use for them. Seeing as it's unknown how Phone Guy even creates the monsters, maybe they are simply reshaped into the monsters we see later in the nights. Next up, who could the Ghast be? Now the Ghast most likely is just an Easter egg and an obvious reference to Golden Freddy from Five Nights at Freddy's, even down to the text on screen. But let's dig a little deeper. Once again, there are several possibilities. The Ghast could be a ghost, much like the ghost from the slots machine. However, it's confirmed all those ghosts work for the Prophet of the Red Circle, and would most likely kill Cade. While the Ghast is peaceful, and doesn't try to harm Cade. Therefore, I think it's more likely that Ghast is not a ghost, but instead a normal monster, like the other monsters that attack Cade. I personally believe Ghast is one of the original monsters created by Phone Guy to entertain his daughter. That would also explain that Ghast doesn't try to kill the player, as the original batch of monsters was made for the purpose of entertainment, and not the killing of anyone who takes the job of the plant island. This could also explain the phrase, "it's not me," as it could mean the Ghast is pleading they're innocent when it comes to the death of Phone Guy's daughter. Another question that needs answering is who the man in the bakery from night 4 onwards is. There's two main options here, one being the phone guy himself and the other being the prophet of the red circle. What basis do I have for these claims? Well, pretty much nothing, as the bakery man doesn't say or do anything. However, if it's the phone guy, it could explain why the phone never rings on night 5. It would also make sense, as from night 4 onwards, phone guy grows more and more desperate to get Cade killed. However, there really aren't any other clues as to who this individual could be. Now, a lot of the answers to these questions are purely speculation on my part. There's honestly next to no evidence in-game to support them. And while there are still some unanswered questions, like who the man from the third monologue is, I think there's a somewhat complete picture of the lore now. But what if I told you none of this matters? It's time to stop playing games. I am here to tell you the real story of my nights at My Singing Monsters. A story of creation and destruction. It was at this point that my original script for the video had ended. I thought I was done with this game and saw all it had to offer. I thought I had a pretty good picture of the lore despite not really knowing much about the overarching antagonist, the Prophet of the Red Circle. However, I wanted to make sure I covered this game to the fullest. I wanted to make sure not a single stone was left unturned. The ghost death screen gave me the idea to try and get jump scared by every single monster, to see if there were other death screens that contained mention of the lore. Thanks to Winter MG's playthrough, I already know how to deal with most monsters before I even played the game myself. So when I did play through it several times, I managed to escape jump scares on every single night, except night 5. Maybe there were in fact secrets in the jump scares. However, in the downtime between jump scares, I got really bored just waiting for the monsters to approach. So I started messing around a bit. I remembered the last line of the Steam description saying that there's a lot to discover if you think outside the box, with outside the box being in italics. Maybe meaning I should take it more literally. Maybe the office we play in throughout the game is the box in question, and I should escape it. So I tried, and lo and behold, escaping the office was actually as easy as shooting your feet with the potato cannon. The real game had finally started. The moment you escape the desk, there's only really one way to go, which is through the hall that the monsters appear in. The moment you leave this dark room, you see a huge black wall with the text, "It was never the plant island. It was never even nighttime. It was all a lie." Now, let me interject here. From this point onwards, it becomes incredibly difficult to tell what is actually canon and what isn't. This out of bounds area is filled to the brim with random PNGs, whether it's strange memes or just random screenshots. The out of bounds area itself also doesn't seem likely to be canon to the plot. My point is, things seen in this area have no rhyme or reason as to what is actually canon to the lore. There are tablets and texts that do describe lore, and there are texts that are just ramblings of the creator. I'll try my best to piece the lore together at the end of the video. It was also here that I encountered a problem. The monsters. See, the monsters can still kill you, regardless of whether you're in the office or not. So on my first few attempts to navigate this out-of-bounds world, I was on a strict time limit until a monster made it into my office. The full map consists of a bunch of flying islands, and it's laid out like this. The office is all the way at the back, sandwiched between the hatchery and the breeding structure we saw on the cams. In front of the office is a huge meadow, where all the monsters start each night. On the right of the meadow is the mine, and on the left is the bakery. Below the mine is a huge platform, which doesn't contain much on any night after night 1. Each area is surrounded by massive black walls, even having a black ceiling. This was most likely done so no natural light is shown on the cams when the player is playing through the game normally. When I walked outside for the very first time, a couple things caught my eye. Upon taking a right turn, I noticed the models of the 4 office monsters that appeared on night 1. This time just their models, however. Potbelly even shows different stages of development. The office is placed on a small floating island, so I wanted to investigate that first. Upon using the potato cannon again, I managed to get on top of the office. The moment I landed, I obtained a secret, telling me I obtained 1 out of 3. When I looked up, I saw the model of the ghost, which would explain the reflection they alluded to in the ghost's death screen. While I was on the roof, something interesting instantly caught my eye. On top of the office there was a small cabin. However, before I went there, I ended up looking around the office and I found a device that disables all monsters, eliminating the annoying time limit I had. Upon entering the cabin, it becomes quite clear it belongs to Phone Guy. You can see the same phone model as the one in the office, and in the middle of the room is the fake recipe that he believes will let him revive his daughter. Instead of a spell like I thought, it's more of a witch's potion. On the wall there are several pictures, and all of them seem to have the same number on them, some being more obvious than others. This number is 24601. What this number means or whether it has any significance is currently unsure. There is another picture on the wall, one of a silhouette on what looks like a hill. It reads, "As I watch my home perish, I wonder what is next. I am sad and I am terrified. I am betrayed and I am broken." In the corner it says 56258. Upon rotating the image you can actually, barely, make out text in the hill. If I read it correctly, which I might not have, it reads, "Why put so much effort into something nobody will see? Is it simply for the joy of creation?" This shows that the creator is self-aware about how the amount of people that will see most of his content are going to be in the double, maybe even single digits. In the left corner there is what looks like a cauldron, most likely what he is making the soul concoction with. On a little stand next to the chair there seems to be a model of what looks like some type of church. However, by far the most interesting aspect of this cabin is the bulletin board on the right. This is going to be a lot to cover. First of all, there are two pieces of text, one about the Prophet of the Red Circle and another newspaper article, one detailing more missing people. I'll leave both of them on the screen while I read out some of the more interesting parts of both of these texts. The Prophet of the Red Circle is the amalgamation of all the wronged souls, and now roams our realm once again, not as a ghost, but as a vengeful spirit, out for blood and retribution. It brings balance to the world, and has a lot of worshippers. Once the Prophet has located a victim, it will lock them in place, rendering them unable to move. A red glowing circle will then appear on the ground around the victim. The subject will then vanish into thin air, leaving only the remains of a faint circle for a few hours after the disappearance. On one incident, a mother and her child were hit and killed by an empty SUV. Police have identified the owner of the SUV to be 46-year-old Chris Red. When law enforcement showed up, he was nowhere to be found. We also learn about Jeremy Fort, whose daughter has also gone missing. There are a whole lot of pictures on this board. Two anime characters, one with a bloody hand and a woman named the Lady with the Sticks. There's also a PNG of a fat king and a PNG of a flag. There's also what looks like a logo with the text Nocturna and a photo that says the Virtuoso. We see strange codes. One is written entirely in an unreadable font created by the developer, and another code on a post-it note with what looks like the letter D. There's also a note that says Omega Farter, disproving my theory that that was the Sugabush. Lastly, there appears to be some sort of map and a picture of the model church we saw on his stand. Keep all of these things in mind as they will all become very, very important later. On the desk there is a very interesting note. It's a card, Jeremy Fort's card, showing he works for Red Construction. This shows a clear connection between Chris Red, a man who disappeared, but whose van killed a mother and daughter, and Jeremy Fort, whose own daughter is missing. It was around this point, however, that the clock hit 6 AM, and I was automatically transported to Night 2. I'll be referring to the area accessed when leaving the office as the outside, for simplicity's sake. Each night, the outside changes slightly. The general layout will be the same, but the models of the new monsters each night will be added next to the other ones, the PNGs on the walls change, random models between the camera areas change, and the walls change slightly. When looking at the models of the monsters this night, it's notable that Maw and Furcorn have golden fur this time, and not pink and green like they do during the night. The text you read the second you step out of the office reads, "It was never about feeding monsters," something we already discovered in the base gameplay. Once again, the monsters will still attack you even if you're outside, so you'll need to press a kill switch. However, the location of the kill switch also changes each night, meaning you're on a timer again until you find it. For this night, the location is in the entrance of a massive gem mine behind the mine area on the cameras. In between the mines and the meadow, there was a stray image with text on it, which I will now read out. Is it strange that we can find solace in the most uncanny of places? It's almost a form of comfort knowing that shit is just weird. It's hard to describe the precise feeling though. It's like you've reached the end of your life and there's nothing left but to smell the roses and destimulate yourself. Your whole perspective, it changes. Life was never about the things you thought it was, all your goals and ambitions nullified. You are full of emptiness, but in a good way. The text is written on a picture of the office with Phone Guy's cabin with a strange filter over it. It seems to be the developer's own ramblings, giving an insight on how he views life at this current moment. It was also on Night 2 that I found the second secret, which was on top of the wall surrounding the bakery. However, there really isn't anything interesting aside from that on Night 2. It was then time for Night 3. The text when leaving the office was a long rant about AI taking over. Ironic, seeing as there is a pretty rampant use of AI in this game, both the credit songs and a whole bunch of PNGs we found around. Once again, the new monsters were added to the growing collection outside. It's notable that the monsters from previous nights are starting to look a bit weirder, mainly the Night 1 monsters who are slowly turning gold. This night introduced Punkleton, who was a real pain while looking for the kill switch, as he is guaranteed to kill you after a set amount of time. However, the kill switch wasn't too hard to find, as it was in the area where I found secret number 2. Each night also has a mushroom power-up, which will speed you up a little bit. The location is once again different each night, but on night 3 I picked up one for the first time. But the main attraction this night is the manifesto on the wall behind the mines. It's written in a horrific font that is barely readable, but after looking at it for probably over 20 minutes, I wrote a transcript of it. It is I, Splitting Necks. I have returned from the grave. I don't know how or why, but I am here, and I am here to stay. My former master, Nocturna, in his crusade to unite the universe and bring peace and prosperity to the galaxy. The Queen of Hearts will get what's coming to her, and we shall rule the world. Pyre will fall, and so will the realm of the Virtuoso. The foreseeable future will be filled with destruction and ruin, but in its place will grow vibrant flowers and happy times. This is the future I want for my people. This is the future I want for everyone. Sacrifices must be made for the greater good. Blood must be shed in a display of beautiful crimson agony for new beginnings to take shape. This is the cost of conquest and the price of progress. I remember, back in the time where I'm from, in the year 276, I had a strange encounter with one of my generals. The man with blood on his hands was his name, and I think he is the devil. His army suffered major casualties during the siege of Pyre, so I ordered him to be executed. But then he started speaking to me with such arcane rhetoric. Then he vanished, seemingly into thin air. I reckon he is still around here today. We see some returning names, along with some new ones. Splitting Necks seems to be a servant of Nocturna, whose goal it is to seemingly destroy everything in order for things to start anew. The Virtuoso seems to be on an opposing side to this, with the Queen of Hearts being on the Virtuoso's side. However, it is hard to identify what the Virtuoso's motivations are from this text alone. Lastly, there's the man with blood on his hands, one of Splitting Necks' generals. This could be the image on Phone Guy's bulletin board, the anime character with blood on his hands. It's unclear who he is, but we do know he is some sort of magician. However, the last line of this manifesto makes me believe this man could potentially be the Prophet of the Red Circle, as that is another being with supernatural powers that exists today. However, this theory is subject to change, of course. Aside from the manifesto, Night 3 has nothing else interesting. Time for Night 4. Night 4 gave me quite a lot of trouble, as the kill switch was very hard to find for me. In case you're wondering, it's on the secret platform below the mines. Upon entering the outside, we see another message from Splitting Necks. This one is called Call for Vacancy. Dear Lord Schmeckletons the 17th, your deranged brother is acting up again. I require thee to step forth and speaketh with him. This foolish boy must be locked up for good. He has now founded a rebel settlement on Paraiso territory that defies its master. Gerald the Defiler has had a go at him, but the Knights of Pyre defeated him and rolled his head back to Paraiso. You are perhaps the only one who can end this conflict. Paraiso will shine on prosperous glee while Pyre crumbles. Signed, Splitting Necks. I think it's fair to assume that this letter comes from the time Splitting Necks was still around, the year 276. We know that Splitting Necks is against the faction of Pyre and works for Paraiso. We know that the unnamed brother of Lord Schmeckletons the 17th is a betrayer and set up a settlement that supposedly defies its master. Whether this master is Lord Schmeckletons the 17th or Nocturna is unclear, but nothing in this letter seems to really connect to the lore of the game that we've explored so far, so we'll come back to it when we have more answers. It was on this night that I noticed some pink text where the first secret was. It says that the secret ending might not be possible on Night 2 onwards. A welcome push in the right direction. Once again, the new monster models are outside the office, alongside the Wubbox for some strange reason. Lastly, around the mines area of the outside, there's this strange review. While initially just looking like a random string of text, we see a returning name. The man in the right corner, aka Phone Guy. He's always watching, always judging, but never being racist. Then he vanished. This might allude that there's more to Phone Guy than we formerly thought. It was now time for Night 5. Night 5 adds nothing new, not even any new PNGs. The kill switch is on top of the meadow, but that's honestly the only interesting thing about it. The new monsters are there as well, and the previous monsters are looking really strange, especially the Night 1 monsters, who just look decayed. The wall that previously had text on it is now gone, showing the hatchery, but that really is all there is to say about Night 5. It was at this point that I returned to Night 1. seeing as the pink text told me that the secret ending might not be possible on any other night. The only real lead I had was the third secret, which I still had not found at this point. I was growing slightly frustrated, as throughout the 5 nights I had explored essentially every nook and cranny, yet the third secret remained almost unfindable. I was fearing I would have to do some crazy parkour and reach places that would normally be out of bounds. However, while I was exploring the secret platform where the kill switch was on night 4, I looked up and saw this strange tunnel. I tried jumping into it, but I didn't reach enough height. The only way to get into the tunnel was via its ceiling, through a tiny slit at the top. This was easier said than done, as every solid piece I could stand on was black. However, I ended up finding my way in. I was expecting the third secret, but I instead came across this blue door, with yet another strange, unreadable code on top of it. I entered the door. I decided to call this place the Blue Dimension for obvious reasons. The Blue Dimension is a mirrored version of the normal nights, meaning the layout is generally the same. However, everything from the normal dimension was stripped away, both the camera areas and the PNGs. The only 2 objects that remain are a single bakery and a lantern post in the place where the Meadow area would be. There is another island, for lack of a better term, but it's inaccessible from this location. Lastly, where the office is in the normal dimension is now a massive wall of text in a code I didn't recognize. Where the bulletin board was on Phone Guy's cabin, there is another wall of text. I took screenshots of everything and closed the game for today. I googled what this code could possibly be with absolutely no results. I then started asking some of my friends, and one of them instantly knew what it was. He told me it was a cipher, and he taught me how to solve it. You give each symbol a letter, then check the frequencies of each letter and compare them to the frequencies of letters in the actual English alphabet. So for example, if the symbol that you named C is the most frequent, that symbol would most likely correspond to the letter E, as that's the most frequent letter in the English alphabet. If you keep going this way, you'll most likely figure out the sentence. After my friend solved the first one, I took it upon myself to translate the big one, using the letters he figured out. In the 2 hours I spent translating this big wall of symbols, I actually learned how to read them fluently, showing just how absorbed I was in this rabbit hole. I suppose you're wondering what the text translate to, so without further ado, I will now read out the one that was in place of the bulletin board. The Queen of Hearts and the Ace of Spades are meeting special rendezvous. Pat, the stroke of mid-Delilah, while the Prophet watches closely. Their true identities along with verification of their existences will finally be revealed. Speculation that they are one and the same has been hypothesized. We need to ensure that they do not find out. It's not quite clear what this means exactly, but we do learn some new things. We learn that the Prophet of the Red Circle is active at the same time as the Queen of Hearts, who is an enemy of Splitting Necks, a man from the year 276. We're also introduced to the Ace of Spades for the first time. However, in the same text, it's hypothesized that they and the Queen of Hearts are actually the same individual. If you ask me what this means, the faction of the Queen of Hearts and the Virtuoso made up the Ace of Spades as a way of intimidating the enemy. However, the Prophet will investigate a fake meeting between the Queen and the Ace, as the Prophet is speculating that they might be one and the same. This text is most likely directed to someone working for the Virtuoso, or even the Virtuoso himself, warning that the Prophet is speculating that they are one and the same, and that it must be ensured that they do not find out they are. At least that's my interpretation of this text in particular. If you're curious as to what the big text on the wall said, I'll put it on screen because I am not reading this out. It's hard to tell whether this is just the ramblings of the developer, or if these are the ramblings of a character in the lore. However, I'd like to believe it's the former, since I refuse to believe that Freddy Fazbear is canon in this lore. So what could the blue dimension signify? Well, I personally believe it's a metaphor for the feelings of the developer. The last line of the massive wall of text reads, "Not gonna lie, I'm listening to the Interstellar OST right now while writing this, getting me hella pumped but sad at the same time that there may be no one to ever uncover this message. It makes me feel alone. Alone and blue." Feeling blue obviously means feeling sadness. The developer also acknowledged the same thing before, mainly in the picture on Phone Guy's wall, where he also stated almost nobody will see this. Whether the same man that put this in his game is some profound individual, well, I'll leave that up to you. While we learned some new lore, ultimately no progress was made in the blue dimension, as I was still clueless as to where the third secret was, and I didn't take a single step close to finding out. However, with my new skill of deciphering the ciphers, I returned to Phone Guy's cabin, and translated the code on the bulletin board. It says, "Lady Styx, I decree thee to bringeth me another human. My army is slowly growing, I just need a few more." Once again we're introduced to a new character, Lady Styx. The person who is speaking to Lady Styx is unclear, however, but we do know that they are creating an army. Once we know more, we can come back to it. Upon decoding the post-it note, it says, "The virtuoso is the creator of many multiverses," implying that the virtuoso is some kind of god. However, despite this all, I still had no idea where I could possibly find the third secret. I spent another day looking for the final secret, but I genuinely could not find it for the life of me. It got to the point where I looked for the developer's Steam page and I left a comment asking where it was. He ignored me, however, but I guess that's understandable. Then, after a much needed stroke of luck, I finally found it. On night 3 I decided to have a closer look at the gigantic Punkleston statue that looms over the outside. After I reached it, I wanted to see if there was a way to enter the hatchery, which was contained between the walls. However, I had picked up a mushroom and ended up flying over the edge, right to my death. However, in my final moments I actually spotted it. It was right over the edge of the secret platform, almost unfindable if you don't know where to look beforehand. Upon finally collecting all 3, this happened. The secret ending was a nice mountainous landscape with Undertale music in the background. Aside from the odd weird meme in the sky, there really wasn't much to see. There was a rock with another code on it, a door frame back to the main menu with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure hentai on the back of it, and an entertaining story. I won't make you listen to the full thing as it's nonsensical, but I transcribed it, so if you want to read it, you can pause the video now. There was also a huge bird looming over me, and an empty doorframe that leads to nowhere. Lastly, there was another doorframe, one that said Super Secret Area, which I presume I would need a potato cannon for. Realistically, my only lead right now was the code on the rock. It reads the passcode to my bunker is 808. After this it was probably around 1 AM in real time, so I ended up calling it a day. The next day of my investigation was dedicated to finding this bunker. There were several locations that came to mind. First and most likely, the map in Phone Guy's cabin. Figuring out where the map location wasn't too difficult. There are 2 landmarks on the map, a question mark, most likely the secret where the ghost is, and a white cube, which is floating right outside the office. When I went to the spot where the X is marked, I saw several things, but one thing that piqued my interest the most was a plate on the floor that simply said door. This pretty much confirmed my suspicions about this location being what I was looking for. There was, however, a small issue. There was no interface where I could type the code. I tried just typing it on my keyboard, but that didn't work either. I tried a lot of things, like pressing the interact button on every single object in the area, typing out 808 in letters. I even tried to shoot the door with 808 potatoes and put 808 in every single box in the character creator, yet none of it worked. I tried the same thing in some other locations, like the suspicious empty doorframe in the secret ending or in the blue dimension, hoping it would give me access to the other island. Yet nothing worked. I once again asked the dev for help, this time more politely, but I was ignored again. Fair enough. I probably spent over 3 hours trying to figure this out, and I ended up making 0 progress for the first time since discovering the outside. The next day, however, I finally did make some progress. I decided to return to the secret ending again, making sure I looked absolutely everywhere. This time I noticed a very tiny piece of text on the floor, something I missed earlier. The text said secret path ahead. I didn't give myself any time to beat myself up, and I went straight along the secret path, bringing me to the super secret area that I'd assumed I needed the potato cannon for. Upon approaching the door, I got dragged down right before I reached it, and I entered something that looked like the back rooms. The room I had found myself in was largely empty, except for several walls in the middle of it. The first wall I passed said the writing is on the wall. After that I ran into 3 chairs, which might have some symbolic meaning that I just don't understand. After that I saw a bar, playing a Frank Sinatra cover of the Five Nights at Freddy's 1 song by the Living Tombstone. AI generated, of course. It's worth noting that both the back rooms and this bar area were foreshadowed in Phone Guy's cabin. On the floor in the bar is the potato cannon, leading you onto the ceiling of the back rooms. We see another PNG and the Fortnite cube, meaning I will get a shout out like the credits said. If you're curious if there's anything else on the outskirts of the back rooms, there isn't. I ended up walking too far and just falling off the map. At the end of the ceiling there's a door, leading you to the next area. This area seems to be a reference to SCP-087, the Infinite Stairway. Once again, if you try to go the other way, you will simply fall off the map. You can go about 3 floors down until you hit the next area. They're once again PNGs, one of an iceberg and one of the Inception. The Inception is the developer taking a screenshot and putting it in each area, making the original image smaller and smaller and smaller. You know what I mean. There sadly isn't a whole lot to discover here. Upon reaching the 4th floor, it will say 087, as an homage to the SCP the area is based on, before falling through the floor, once again reaching a new area. We now appear to be in some sort of mountain range. In front of us there's a 3x3 roster and a sign on how to navigate the roster safely. On top of the mountain to the right, there's a sign pointing us to San Clario. After all of this, it's easy to forget that's where most of this takes place. Upon entering this area, there's text on the screen, pointing out that there's holes in the mountain and pointing us to the strange sign. It's noteworthy that instead of dying if you fall, you instead get 5 lives. After crossing the roster, we see a new code. This one reads, "Some people call me a prophet, for I'm the bringer of new beginnings. But other people call me Necromancer Prime, for being the creator of woefully rancid melodies." It was this text that made me think Prophet of the Red Circle was actually supposed to be Prophet, but the dev consistently called it Prophet, so who knows really. This text offers us some pretty good insight. I think it's safe to assume that this font is the alphabet used by the Prophet of the Red Circle. This could also mean that the other font is the alphabet used by the Virtuoso, meaning it will be easier to tell who's speaking from this point forward. The code was written on a place called the Anti-Bakery, a location that was referenced in the entertaining story in The Secret Ending. Inside there's a bunch of random PNGs, but one stands out as it contains another code. The code is in binary, while on the bottom of the picture it says message 29. I've not found any other messages in my entire investigation, so I think it's safe to say it's the only one. Translating the binary gives us the following message. "The place I am from is no more, 56258. The only time we've seen this code before is on the picture in Phone Guy's cabin, which contained a similar message. It's quite obvious that it's the same person that left both of these messages. Upon exiting the bakery, we can go several ways. Either we go to the right, to the minigame, the left, or the center, where a door to the next area is. The minigame appears to just be sliding over a piece of text, while someone repeatedly says, "Not the weed whacker." The text says some nonsense in German that doesn't have any clues for the lore. After a while, the minigame prompts you to return to the main menu. If you take the left path, you can make it to the door with some red text next to it. The door doesn't take you anywhere, and the text, presumably written by the Virtuoso, considering the font, serves as a disclaimer that the doors used to travel between areas are not at all inspired by Monsters, Inc. Upon going to the middle door, we are once again taken to a new area. The new area appears to be a large, empty space. In front of me there's a large Walmart, as well as loads upon loads of treadmills. There is also a large image with a whole bunch of Joker memes. Behind me there was a crashed car with the mushroom, the same as the ones from the outside of the main Knights. Going to the left from this car takes you to yet another door. However, instead of sending you to a new area, it takes you right back to the mountain range. When I went back a little bit, I saw the museum. The museum had 2 areas, a classic art section and a modern art section. The classic art section has works from Da Vinci, Van Gogh, and even a certain dictator from the 1930s. The modern art section has paintings, most likely made by the developer himself. In the middle of the modern art section there is a scaffolding. On the scaffolding we see another model of the strange church we saw in Phone Guy's cabin. Upon returning to the treadmills, a lot of them seem to have some society if memes. However, one of the treadmills actually has a familiar looking map. The same map we saw in Phone Guy's cabin. However, this one is brightened, showing that it was never a map of Night 1, but instead a map of this area. We'll go to that area soon, but first let's have a look at this Walmart. On top of the entrance there is more text. It reads, "Come into my realm." There's a Steam review for a game called Retail Royale. The review is a story about an individual finally finding a parking spot for IKEA. However, the man in the right corner appears behind him and tells him to stop running from his feelings. It's worth noting that this review is from January 19, 2023. Showing that this lore, or at least the character of the man in the right corner, has been in the works for quite a while. On the left of the Walmart we see a room simply called Sex Now 14+. On the wall it once again says the passcode to my bunker is 808. We'll come back to the sex room and the Walmart. For now, let's keep looking around. On the back of the Walmart we see a familiar face, the bakery man, this time up close. There are two types of code on this image. The binary code reads, "The virtuoso made a deal with me to split universe 56258. The Morse reads, "The consequences were insurmountable." At the bottom it says, "The war will end soon," in Sanskrit. Next to this image there is more code. When translated it reads, "The virtuoso will know pain, the pain that he deserves, the pain that I have felt for eons, the pain that writhes in a dense macabre of despair, the pain that is inevitable." This makes it seem like the prophet has a personal vendetta against the virtuoso. On top of the back wall of the Walmart it says, "These people do not realize that I am the one who pulls the strings, I am the one who knocks, bitch," written in the virtuoso's font. On the final wall of the Walmart there is a deep-fried picture of Jesus Christ, with the writing, "I have found the approximate location of the bite of 2015. No clue what that means. Now that we have explored all around the Walmart, it's time to actually take a look inside. Upon entering, I returned to a familiar office, one that I had spent many nights in at this point. However, things were off. First of all, there was a horrific filter on the screen, and instead of any singing monsters, we instead get two original monsters to attack us throughout the night. This spider, who serves as a vent monster, and this strange floating head, who replaces the Ent Brat. This is essentially an endless mode, or well, until you run out of ammo or power at least. Once again, the number 808 returns. This time it's your starting ammo. Instead of a big battery on the desk, there is now a battery on the HUD, showing how much power is left. After getting killed by either monster, you see this death screen, saying that no matter what you did, you would have been killed. I played this night, which I ended up calling Freaky Night, normally several times, all yielding no results. As with the regular nights, it's possible to go out of bounds. However, there isn't a kill switch this time, and there's honestly next to nothing to find, aside from a possible face reveal from the developer. There is, however, a strange creature that follows you around when you enter Phone Guy's cabin. Thought that was pretty interesting. When you die in Freaky Night, you return right to the main menu, meaning you have to do it all over again to return to the Walmart dimension. Upon returning, I decided to look at the map on the treadmill I found. It takes you to a torn note and more text. This one reads, "The lady with the sticks and the man with blood on his hands are not real." I think this means that the virtuoso side was not the only side making up characters, like the Ace of Spades. Nocturna's side has done the exact same. The note is half of a Google Doc link titled The Log of a Lost Traveler, yet another thing foreshadowed in the ghost death screen. Now, I do have to spoil that I found the other half, and the Google Drive link ended up not existing, or not being accessible, and since I didn't want to bother Hathan, the developer, a third time, I ended up leaving that stone a bit unturned. Continuing on from the note, there are two astronauts in the distance showing the moon landing. I think this means the Walmart is supposed to be on the moon, which I suppose in hindsight is kind of obvious, but I also don't really know what that means. However, we are still not done. Instead of going to the Walmart, this time around I went to the left, and I found the building that had been foreshadowed ever since I first went outside to the office. The strange church. As you approach it, some beautiful music plays, and you slow down significantly. However, once you make it to the door, a cutscene plays. Probably the only in the entire game.
So you have found my lair. I am the virtuoso. What am I? I am a supernatural entity that transcends the very fabric of your reality. I can seamlessly pass into the fourth dimension and move between realities. I created this universe and many others. Why? I need mortals to do my bidding, for my abilities, as vast as they are limited. You were never here to feed monsters. You were never here to solve 5 Nights at Freddy's lore. You were never here to learn about a fictional town. I must combat Nocturna, a putrid entity chewing up universes and swallowing symphonies whole. I am recruiting individuals to intercept and destroy this plague. Among the followers of Nocturna, the foul Omega Farter, he who can fill the air with a stench so putrid not even a mosquito could survive. And that's before he even farts. He has used his power of the farts to fabricate and ferment individuals who are loyal to him and only him. He rules over 3 universes and jointly has stakes in 5, 6, 2, 5, 8. The Prophet of the Red Circle controls much of the universe you are from, and is thought by the inhabitants to just be a myth, but it is real and more deadly than ever. It uses dark sorceries from the Nocturna school of magic to conjure misfortune or even death upon insubordinate constituents of his realm. I will even go as far as to say that Nocturna and the Prophet of the Red Circle are one and the same. I am not without a few allies of my own, however. I have the mighty Breadromancer. As mysterious as she is powerful, no further information will be disclosed concerning her. The mystery of the Breadromancer is for you and you alone to discover. When you step through this portal, you will be taken to the front line and given a weapon. Do my bidding and make me proud. That fool won't even know what hit him.
We have now achieved the canon ending of My Nights at My Singing Monsters. And now we finally have a decent picture of the lore. But what if I told you there's actually yet another ending? To get here, we have to return to the Walmart dimension yet another time. However, this time we enter the sex room. Upon walking in, there is in fact a nude woman, which startled me as I'm deathly afraid of women. As I stumbled backwards, terrified, I fell off the platform and entered yet another new area. I once again found myself in the back rooms. However, this time there was a strange filter over it, almost resembling the filter from Freaky Night, and the surrounding area was different. In the distance, you can see something resembling a castle. But after trying pretty hard, I did not manage to reach it. There's sadly not much to explore here in the freaky backrooms. We can once again pick up the potato cannon from the bar and reach the top of the ceiling to enter the next area. The next area is a freakified version of the SCP-087 dimension that connected to the mountain range before. Instead of having numbers on the signs, this time it has words in Nocturna's font, spelling out which floor you're on. Upon reaching the bottom, we finally see the final piece of the puzzle, the bunker. This is also where we encounter the final picture on Phone Guy's wall, the one with the code that reads 24601. Next to the bunker is an interface. I typed in every code we encountered so far, 24601, 56258, and 808, but only the last code did anything. We are taken to a room with a lot of PNGs. We see a code we saw earlier at the Walmart and a final letter from Splitting Necks. It reads, "O Lord, O great Lord, I have done thy bidding once again. The rotten little scoundrel, the detective, has been dealt with. Subject will not be of concern to us for the foreseeable future. Yet another step forward. Yet another step of your grand plan. Together, my lord, we will be the creators of the new world, and thus the new order. Glory to Nocturna. Signed, Splitting Necks." There's also a YouTube link at the bottom of the letter, but it doesn't work once again. It could be that I typed it wrong because of the font, but I tried so many different things that none of them worked. So sadly, we will not see the evidence provided by Splitting Necks. There's also a large image resembling a poster, showing the many secrets lurking in the game. There are also 2 exits to leave the bunker. This one with a freaky face on it, and another, which is just a straight drop into the abyss. The face door will simply take you back to Freaky Night, while the plunge will take you to an alternate ending, where we hear the same voice we heard all the way back in Monologue 3.
You have made the right decision, my dear boy. Together we must fight. Together we must fight against the opposition powers. The virtuoso is going to lose this war, and you will be on the winning side. We need to unite the universe under our rule.
Doing so will give you the Red Pill ending, which marks the end of everything we can explore in the game. Now it's time to try and make sense of the lore, which is not easy. However, there's a couple things that we know for sure. My Nights at My Singing Monsters is a story of 2 godlike beings, the Virtuoso and Nocturna. The Virtuoso is the creator of many multiverses, including the one we play in. Nocturna, however, destroys these multiverses. It does so because it believes carnage is necessary for good times, as described in the manifesto of Splitting Necks. Both of these entities have allies. The Virtuoso has the Bread Romancer and the Queen of Hearts, while Nocturna has Splitting Necks and the Omega Farter. Seeing that Nocturna was already an object of worship in the year 276, when Splitting Necks originally lived, we know that this battle has been going on since way before the game actually starts. Fast forward to a little while before the present day. We know Phone Guy, also known as the Man in the Right Corner, lost his daughter to a monster he created. On a location known as the Plant Island, he finds a book that describes a recipe that can revive a dead person as long as 100 souls are taken unwillfully. However, the recipe is actually a fake, meaning Phone Guy will forever collect souls. These souls go to an entity called the Prophet of the Red Circle, which is actually what the citizens of San Clario, where the game takes place, call Nocturna. Nocturna has been taking souls in the city for a while. While we know next to nothing about the extent of the Virtuoso's powers, several newspaper clippings and other articles give us a good idea of Nocturna's powers. We know from the Virtuoso's speech that there is a Nocturna School of Dark Arts.
It uses dark sorceries from the Nocturna School of Magic to conjure misfortune or even death upon insubordinate constituents of his realm.
We also know how Nocturna takes his victims. He locks them in place while a red circle that is around 2 meters in diameter appears on the ground around them. After this, the victim vanishes into thin air. The red circle stays for a little while after the kill, which is how Nocturna got his name here. Nocturna also has an army of ghosts who serve it. In the present day, Nocturna is said to take many forms, some humanoid and some more resembling an arachnid. According to the people of San Clario, Nocturna seeks out individuals who have sinned in a previous life, and is actually a being that brings balance, which is why it has a large amount of worshippers. The people of San Clario do not mention the Virtuoso, so we don't really have any additional context about him. In the canon story of the game, Cade Kingston, the protagonist, takes the offer and almost becomes another one of Phone Guy's victims. However, he instead learns the truth, and joins the Virtuoso side in the war, after which he goes home. In an alternative non-canon ending, Cade joins Nocturna's side in the war. Next up is Splitting Necks. While we don't know anything about him outside his 3 letters, we can assume he used to be some kind of warlord, belonging to the settlement of Paraiso. We know he was at war with the settlement of Pior. Aside from explaining Nocturna's motivations a bit better, this presence doesn't seem to have much impact on the lore. We know he has a vendetta against the Queen of Hearts, and we know he died, and was then resurrected. I believe that the Queen of Hearts is responsible for his death, but that's only a theory. Now it's time for the rest of the story, which involves a lot more theorizing, as the available information regarding certain subject has quite a lot of gaps in it. The part that intrigues me most is the Man in the Right Corner, or Phone Guy, as he seems to be more than just any regular resident of San Clario. We know for a fact that the Man in the Right Corner and the Phone Guy are one and the same, thanks to the ghost death screen. Thanks to the 2 reviews we randomly find in the game, we also know that the Man in the Right Corner is some sort of spirit that can appear and disappear almost anywhere. The reviews describe people that saw an appearance of the Man in the Right Corner, then watched him disappear again. The Steam review describes the Man in the Right Corner as a nightmare that's haunted him ever since an unknown incident, while the Google Maps review describes briefly seeing him as a metaphor for how the greatest things occur very infrequently. While you don't have access to the log of a lost traveler because the Google Doc didn't work, Hafen, the developer, has an abridged version on his Steam profile. The log describes the story of an individual being watched and tormented by the Man in the Right Corner. However, after finally exchanging words, the Man in the Right Corner leaves the individual for good, leaving him craving for his return despite feeling tormented by him before. It reaches a point of severe mental deterioration until we ultimately hear nothing from him anymore. I believe the Steam review is actually an extract from the complete log. The abridged version starts at December 2016, while the Steam review is from July 2016. The Steam review and the abridged log also share a similar theme of the subject being haunted by the Man in the Right Corner, since the incident. What is the incident, you might ask? Well, the abridged log ends with something we have seen before. The Bite of 2015. The story describes the battle between a student at an academy and a glintstone dragon, who attacks them on their way to the academy. It ends abruptly, probably because the story hit the character limit. All we know is the student survived the encounter despite impossible odds. If we assume the student is the same individual that is haunted by the Man in the Right Corner, I think this is the incident that caused the Man in the Right Corner to haunt them. This could mean that the student survived thanks to the meddling of the Man in the Right Corner who ended up saving them. I really said the Man in the Right Corner a lot there. Now, how does this actually fit into the lore? And the answer might be that it just doesn't. At all. The Steam review was posted almost 2 years before the game released. It's clear that the man in the right corner is a character from a story written by Hathen way before this game released. I personally believe it is more likely that this new project by Hathen has a few references to his past project that don't really impact the story of this new project. Let's return to that later, however. Next up, let's look at Phone Guy's cabin from the base Nights. Almost everything in the game was foreshadowed here, showcasing that the man in the right corner is far more knowledgeable than we formerly thought. The ghost death screen and the third monologue imply that Phone Guy is simply being used. However, I personally believe that Phone Guy is much more aware than we think. First of all, it's very clear from the bulletin board that the man in the right corner knows who Nocturna and the Virtuoso are. He also knows how Nocturna takes his victims because of the article on his desk. He even has leads on the Bread Romancer and the Omega Farter, showing just how involved he is. However, one of the most interesting parts of his cabin is the 56258 poster. We don't know too much about Universe 56258. We know that someone made a deal to split it with the Virtuoso, and we know that part of it, if not all of it, got destroyed. I'd like to once again bring up the different fonts we have encountered. We know that this blocky line alphabet belongs to Nocturna, thanks to the Freakified SCP-087 dimension showing the floor numbers in that alphabet. I can't believe that's a sentence I just said, by the way. While it's a bit less set in stone, I also think it's reasonable enough to assume that the alphabet encountered in the blue dimension is that of the Virtuoso, thanks to the message detailing how the Prophet must not find out the Ace of Spades and the Queen of Hearts are the same person. However, there's yet another way of messages being coded, being the binary texts. There are only 2 of them in the game, one in the Anti-Bakery in the Mountain Rage dimension, and one on the picture of the Bakery Man, which we can find in both the regular nights on Night 4 onwards and also on the back of the Walmart. Both of the messages in binary relate to Universe 56258, further solidifying that the person who wrote the message in the Anti-Bakery and the person who wrote the text on the Bakery Man image is one and the same. But who could this person be? I think it might be the one and only man in the right corner. Now we are about to enter heavy speculation territory, seeing as we just don't have that much information about both 56258 and a man in the right corner. But here goes. I believe 56258 was originally ran by just Nocturna. Both the man in the right corner and his daughter lived here rather peacefully. We know Nocturna has necromancing powers, and we know that there are Nocturna schools of dark magic. I don't think it's far-fetched that Nocturna's powers are passed on to his followers, who can learn them in the schools. The man in the right corner was one of these people. However, he didn't use his necromancing powers for evil. He instead used them to create monsters to entertain his daughter. However, one of these monsters ended up eating his daughter, seeing as they are still born from Nocturna's destructive powers. However, ultimately, the war ended up destroying part of 56258, causing the death of the man in the right corner. However, somehow he returned. Not as a person, but as some sort of ghost, an omnipresent being. This explains why in the reviews and the log of the Lost Traveler he can appear and reappear anywhere at will. Now how this happened is uncertain. Maybe he casted a spell on himself or someone else managed to resurrect him, seeing as necromancy isn't unheard of in the lore. Upon reawakening, the man in the right corner saw the destruction of his former home, which explains who wrote the messages in binary in the cabin. Knowing that this war was started by Nocturna's philosophy to destroy everything for it to start anew, the man in the right corner turned against his former master, and made a deal with the Virtuoso instead, splitting the universe to give the Virtuoso some control over it. This is most likely also the war where Splitting Necks was killed. As the war goes on for many more years, the man in the right corner stops being involved. He instead spends his time visiting other people, including the writer of The Lost of a Log Traveler. However, Nocturna eventually becomes aware of the man in the right corner's betrayal, and in an act of revenge, plants a fake recipe that can bring back his lost daughter. The man in the right corner isn't so easily fooled, however, and instead uses his chance to recruit new soldiers for the Virtuoso, right under Nocturna's nose. If a person is strong enough to survive the monsters the man in the right corner throws at them, and has the curiosity to figure out the vast history of this universe, they are fit to become a soldier for the Virtuoso. The only person that withstood all these trials was none other than Kate Kingston, who ends up being the final piece in the Virtuoso's victory. That about concludes my nights at My Singing Monsters. There's definitely more to this game that I have not talked about. Every area is filled to the brim with random memes, PNGs, and pictures that I can't even place in either of those categories. However, if I discussed all of those in this video, it would be probably twice as long, and to be honest, none of them are all that interesting. Now, I do not have access to the full lore, as the Log of a Lost Traveler and the YouTube video that is in Splitting Neck's final letter are completely inaccessible to me. However, with what I was given, I think I did a pretty okay job at piecing the lore of this game together, especially since Hathan himself stated that he's not sure if he understands the lore himself. If you actually made it all the way to the end of the video, or just listened to it in the background, thank you so much. This is probably the longest, most ambitious passion project I've ever worked on, and it would mean the world if you gave this video a like and left a comment. Now finally, while I did pretty much everything in this video myself, I definitely want to give some shoutouts. First of all, a huge shout out to my friend Loki, who taught me how to decode the ciphers and also gave me some ideas at points where I was at a complete loss. Next up, I want to give a shout out to Winter MG for letting me use his clips in the video, but also being generally supportive behind the scenes, even though we never spoke before. Next up, a shout out to my friend Wynog for creating the thumbnail of this video, and lastly a shout out to my girlfriend, who also helped me piece the lore of this game together. That said, thank you all for watching, and I hope I will see you again in the near future. Goodbye.